pleasant good night, Jackie, and a pleasant good night to all who are viewing and listening via various means. I want to take the opportunity to express my gratitude to the Honorable Dr. Timothy Harris, Prime Minister of the Federation of St Kitts and Nevis, for inviting me once again to participate on this panel of Leadership Matters, along with my colleagues who have been working assiduously in that of Dr. Hazel Laws, our CMO, and Dr. Wilkinson, our Medical Chief of Staff. It's also imperative of me to update the nation on the status and the present status of the country, and also the progress we have made for the past year and the projected actions we seek to implement to keep our nations safe. I think my colleagues have said enough, and I will just basically highlight some of the things we have done. Allow me to take you through memory lane for a short while. From since January 21 to March 30th, 2020, there were significant activities that were taken by the National Disaster Coordinator and the CMO at the time as we gathered our groups together to ensure that we have a proper understanding of what we needed to do to prepare and respond to the threat of the novel coronavirus then. We began with a number of activities which I will highlight to you. For example, the training of frontline workers, sensitizing of a number of medical individuals, and also bringing together the Mitigation Council to ensure that everybody was on board. In 1st of February, we advised the Cabinet, and the first travel advisory was issued to citizens and residents to restrict travel from China. We were one of the first independent nations to do so in the Southern Hemisphere. We continued with our activities with meeting with a number of stakeholders, and these stakeholders would have been apprised of what they needed to do in order for us to have the all of society approach. The travel advisory that was issued in response to the rapid intensification and widespread distribution of the COVID-19 cases globally was done in the interest of protecting our borders, as we would have had persons returning from China after celebrating the China's New Year's. We then expanded our travel advisories to countries such as Iran, Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, Japan, and in Europe, Switzerland, United Kingdom, and by extension, French and Dutch territories in the Caribbean, and lastly, the United States of America. On March the 25th, when the two confirmed cases were detected, the country would have gone into an effective lockdown as of 11:59 p.m. Equally so, we would have seen the Honorable Prime Minister announce one of the biggest stimulus package that would have bigger than any other packages in the region. On the 30th of March, we would have experienced the activation of the National Emergency Operations Center along with the Emergency Operations Center on Nevis. The fake news of the novel coronavirus that was creating havoc in our federation was mitigated by the implementation of a risk communication strategy in which we saw the daily briefings at the NEOC being activated. We saw and experienced as a country the implementation of emergency powers that would have restricted and assisted in the response to the novel coronavirus. It is important to note that on the 20th of April, all 15 cases that were first initially detected in the Federation of St Kitts and Nevis all were recovered. In this regard, we continued with the slowly opening of activities, relaxation of activities. Churches in the Federation of St Kitts and Nevis were open under specific COVID-19 protocols in accordance to the regulation. Equally so, it must be highlighted that the government of St Kitts and Nevis, after being consulted, would have repatriated students from Jamaica, Barbados, Cuba, Trinidad and Tobago, and Guyana and by extension, those who were in the United States, to a sum of over $1 million in covering their quarantine, travel arrangement, and testing. We were very successful in going through what was determined as an overly active hurricane season that would have caused somewhere between $60 to $65 billion of damages in 2020. We also weathered the infiltration of our borders by illegal immigrants, which were detected due to the assistance of you, the general public. That infiltration could have caused an outbreak in this country. However, by the proactive approach and assistance of you, we were able to address this situation. In July of 2020, we would have continued with a number of training initiatives in order to prepare the Federation for the reopening of the borders. And St. Kitts, the St. Kitts Tourism Authority would have trained some 3,158 persons working in the hotel industry, while at Nevis, the Nevis Tourism Authorities and the health officials would have trained 1,714 individuals for a total of 4,872 persons being trained within the tourism industry for them to be able to function under the COVID-19 in the context of COVID-19. We continue to lessen the restrictions caused by this pandemic, and the Honorable Prime Minister would have mentioned, along with my colleagues, some of these restrictions in terms of opening the bars, churches, educational institutions, et al. We also saw the restrictions being lifted on our fishermen and our farmers, who were tasked with ensuring that food security would be of high priority for us. We also saw the repatriation of Ross University students, where 124 students were brought from the United States under strict COVID-19 protocols, and a second batch within the month of September being brought to the sum of 170. Since the reopening of our borders on the 31st of October 2020, there have been 2,620 passengers arriving in St. Kitts, while 326 passengers arrived on Nevis, for a total of 2,946 passengers arrivals since the opening of our borders. There was an approximately 70% of returning nationals and residents made up this number. Since our borders have opened, there were a total of 1,838 passengers departing our borders in St. Kitts, and 2,775 passengers departing our borders and Nevis, for a total of 2,113 passengers departing the Federation. And at this time, I would like to highlight the hotels that would have been providing vacation in place, in that of the Royal St. Kitts, Park Hyatt, the St. Kitts Marriott Hotel, and Four Seasons on Nevis. As time grew, we added the Golden Rock and Mount Pelier to provide same. Then we had quarantine facilities, the OTI on St. Kitts, Parkworks on Nevis, Boardwalk Apartment Complex, Ocean's Edge, and recently the Koi Hotel. We continue to create opportunities for our nationals residents to return to the Federation within an accommodable space and also price. For example, we are in further discussion with Sugar Bay Club, Timothy Beach Resort, and Kitishan Hill. We have done extremely well in our screening, surveillance, detection, monitoring, and management system of the novel coronavirus in entry to the Federation. The system put in place, such as the national entry form, and also the monitoring process and the processing process, have worked rather well. Going forward, we are looking at strengthening the corridor of containment, as we have had a number of breaches that have been responded to swiftly. We also want to increase the So we want to increase the testing of persons working in certain industries, and also we want to increase the surveillance, monitoring, and enforcement through the deployment of more human resource in critical areas. We are doing all of this in order for us to create more economic activities for our citizens. In closing, I am encouraging all citizens to trust our medical expert and your hard-working task force, and by extension the government, in preparing ourselves to be one of the fastest vaccinated independent country in the Southern Hemisphere. I believe in you, the people of St Kitts and Nevis. Mr. David Axelrod, former senior advisor to President Barack Obama, once said to Obama, "Hard things are hard." St. Kitts and Nevis will continue to rise over these hard times. Before I close and end this presentation, I would like to acknowledge the members of the Federal Cabinet and the Honorable Prime Minister for being diligent in leading this country and supporting these efforts. Also, I would like to acknowledge the Ambassador Tom Lee for the contribution by the people of the Republic of China and Taiwan to our federation, the Christian Council and Evangelical Association. I would also like to acknowledge the hard-working team within the task force, in that of the Honorable Attorney General, Mr. Vincent Barron Jr., the Honorable Wendy Phipps, the co-chair of the Mitigation Council, Dr. Hazel Laws, CMO, Dr. Wilkinson, Mr. Hilroy Brandy, Commissioner of Police, Superintendent Henry, Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Comrie, Mr. Denzel James, CEO SCASPA, Mr. Kennedy De Silva, Head of Compliance, Mr. Rohan Walters from the Legal Department, Ms. Ophelia Blanchard, Senior Representative from the IT Department, Ms. Kebas, Permanent Secretary in Foreign Affairs, Ms. Marceline Hughes, Chief Immigration Officer, and Mr. Lesroy Williams, Press from the SKNIS. I also want to highlight Ms. Karen Hughes and Alison Isaac, who were the drafters of the COVID-19 regulation, members of the NEOC, members of the HEOC, the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, St. Kitts and Nevis Red Cross, St. Kitts and Nevis Amateur Association, Radio Association, the NTRC, and regionally, I would like to thank SIDIMA, PAHO, CAFA, Impacts, RSS, ECTEL, US Southcom, USAID AFDA, the British High Commission, the US Embassy in Barbados. Please allow me to commend you, the citizens and residents of the beautiful country, in particular those who provide information that has led to the apprehensions of offenders of the laws. We must give God the glories and high praise for what we have done so far in this federation. And with that said, I want to thank you and admonish you to adhere to the protocols. Thank you.